Hi guys, welcome to another Folly of Starnet webcast. So, hi guys, it's Nick Maley here, creature effects designer, author, artist, motivator, here at home in my Yoda Guy movie exhibit in the Caribbean island of St. Martin. Today's webcast is really special because it's literally packed full of behind the scenes photos of practical effects and behind the scene videos and info on economical how-to courses for creators of all levels. We're talking videos and photos and insights. There's lots to see. It's largely about Stan Winston, who was a legendary character effects artist, and his school, or the school bearing his name, continues that tradition. So, with no more to do, let's get on with it. Well, hi everyone. Welcome to a really special StarNet Events webcast from the Folly of Star Foundation. Today, we're going to be talking about a vast variety of instructional videos available through the Stan Winston School of Character Arts. And we're talking prosthetics, we're talking animatronics, puppet building, foam fabrication, making eyes, sculpting masks and miniatures, painting techniques. I mean, it goes on and on, you know. So I'm going to be joined by the founder of the Stan Winston School of Character Arts. That's Matt Winston, who's the son of legendary creature effects designer Stan Winston, who made some of your absolute favorite movies. We've got behind the scenes video of some of Stan's most astounding effects. And we've also got info on how you can learn some of those skills through the school. So how did the school get started?
Yeah, so we founded the school in about a year and a half after Dad's passing in 2008. So we started school around 2000, late 2009. The goal after Dad's passing was to keep his brand of creativity alive, but in a way that would make him proud. And so education was the thing that the family got most excited about. And at that time, online education was becoming a thing. I was learning actually to play guitar online. And I mentioned that to my family. I said, what about online? We can reach a lot more people. We won't be confined to one little, brick and mortar school in LA. And that's what we did. We said, let's make an online school. And we started gathering our friends in the industry to start teaching. And the rest is history. We're closing in on, I think, 250 courses now, 9 years in with no end in sight.
Yeah, and what I think the reason that I recommend your school so often is because it's very affordable too. If you decide that you want to go to a practical school, you're going to spend thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars to do it. Whereas if you plumb for not just one little course, but you plumb for for everything, it's only about $300 and something a year, and you know that. And you can do it at your own pace at home. It's extraordinary. I think pretty much all the older people that are watching today will know Stan's works through through all of. I mean, they've got a vast variety of movies, but people think of him for Jurassic Park and Terminator and Predator and Aliens as well. But maybe for some younger people, they wouldn't know him quite so well. And one of the things that I think is going to be really good today will be, being able to show some of the behind the scenes items from him and from some of his, most classic movies. So I'm going to just run a little bit of that right now.
Everything in Terminator 2 has been finessed. We've had a luxury in this movie. We've been able to do what we normally can never do in a movie. We've been able to take what we did in the first time and do it better the second time. I can also say that now, having finished Terminator 2, we could now go back and do Terminator 2 better than we did at this time the next time around. It's the same endoskeleton. Okay, basically the same design. We have finessed it. You as an audience will not see the differences, but it's much more technically advanced than the endoskeleton in the first movie. It's actually artistically advanced beyond the endoskeleton in the first movie. But these things are subtleties that only we as the artists and technicians will see. Hopefully from an audience standpoint, you'll be seeing just more, but more character, because they can do more. There's more life to these endoskeletons, but they are basically the same endoskeleton. We try to recreate life, and it's impossible. There's nothing that we can do that will actually duplicate living things. We can come close, but we can't do it exactly. And that's what our job is. We are duplicating life. We are duplicating Arnold. We are recreating, we're giving robotic life to things. We are making animatronic duplications of living things. Once you try to duplicate that life in art, in technology, with the use of servos to animatronically move faces, with the finest artists trying to duplicate skin texture and skin tones, with the finest technicians doing all of the mechanical work, with all of the original drawings and designs, with all the sculpture, all of it, we are trying to duplicate life. It's going to be better this time than it was before. It's going to be seamless, hopefully, to the viewer. Arnold, of course, we had to design the makeup effects that made Arnold himself, the actor, appear to be the Terminator, when a certain amount of flesh was removed from his face and certain appendages were ripped off of his body, and the revealing of the robotic aspect underneath him, all of these aspects of Arnold. The makeup effects on Arnold that we have, the chrome aspect of him, the underskin aspect of him, all of these things we learned from the first how to make them better, how to make them lay flatter to his face, how to make the illusion of the chrome underskull be more acceptable as a makeup, so that it wasn't sitting out as far on his face as a makeup. Although the puppets actually work much better, the animatronic puppets, than they did in the first, the need is less because of how well the makeup worked. And because of that, Jim was able to use Arnold in the makeup much more extensively than in the first movie.
You know, we've got a couple of clips from Terminator. I know Terminator really, I think, sets Stan apart in so many, different ways. I first knew about Stan while we were doing Empire Strikes Back, actually, because Stuart Freeborn was really upset that ILM had given Stan his backup Yoda puppet to turn into his backup Chewbacca puppet to turn into Mrs. Chewbacca for the holiday special. And I know that he also built some kids for that as well. So, but Stu was furious about that. He felt it was his private, stuff, his proprietary stuff, and he didn't like that being shared at all. In fact, later on, he didn't even want Lucasfilm to have the molds for Yoda because he was fearful about what they would do with it and who they would give it to, etc., etc. But that was the first time. And then later on, Dick Smith talked to me about the work that your dad was doing on heartbeats, where he was doing a lot of work with gelatine prosthetics, which people weren't really talking about at that time. But of course, today, all this stuff that we put on the internet is getting to be so much more than than it was previously. Information is so much more easily available. We just read a few magazines and that were written by journalists who hadn't asked the right questions. So it was a much harder time then. It must have been extraordinary growing up with Stan.
Well, certainly it was. The studio was actually at our house for the first 9 years of its existence. It was just a little room off our garage, and then the garage would be used for more toxic work. But it was amazing to have actors coming in and getting their life casts done, and Dad creating prosthetic makeups for them. But then when things expanded, he moved into his first studio, and that's when it really got exciting for a young boy to be able to come visit this magical place where brilliant artists of every kind, sculptors, painters, mechanical wizards, were there doing their thing. It was just amazing. And I worked there over the summer, and I worked there on weekends sometimes, and it was truly a magical place to visit throughout my life, for sure. By the way, I have to just say, one of the highlights of my life, actually, as a son of Stan, was when, although Star Wars Holiday Special was terrible, we did receive the Chewbacca backup mask at our house. And I and Stuart Freeborn would be even more appalled. I put that thing on 100 times during the time we had it, and I got to walk around my house wearing a legit Chewbacca mask. And I didn't realize how angry Stuart Freeborn was that was sent to Dad, although it makes perfect sense.
Yeah, well, back then people were much more, kept things much closer to their chests. I think really with the influence of Dick Smith, that largely opened up the kind of sharing kind of ideas that the community has much more now. Let's have a look at a bit more of the videos there.
Sure.
Hi, I'm Ian Stevenson. I was part of the crew at Stan Winston Studios for T2.
This is Evan Brainerd. I was one of the mechanical engineers on Terminator 2 Judgment Day.
This is Bruce Spalding Fuller, and I worked on Terminator 2 Judgment Day.
The Pretzel Man, the T-1000, this was basically the last time we see him as he explodes and falls backwards into the molten metal. On the day when we were on set, all we did is the initial movement, and then Jim Cameron, the director, swapped in just a white frame. You can see like 1 or 2 frames that's just white. And then we cut to the second puppet, full freestanding puppet, where there's a whole leg mechanism that's operated from below with 4 puppeteers, 2 puppeteers on each leg.
So this is Bruce Fuller sculpting on one of the T-1000 heads.
The head that I'm working on is for the T-1000, and it's for what we called the Pretzel Man. A lot of the heads for both Arnold and the T-1000 were cyber scanned for the first time instead of life cast of the actor. And cyberscan was pretty much in its infancy in the time. They were very rough. We actually made molds on them and made a clay press out of the molds and then cleaned that up, and that's how they were achieved.
So this is the T-1000 split head after it gets shot by a shotgun. That shine that you see on the inside there, it's crystal clear. We piled on layer after layer after layer of crystal clear in order to get that shine after having very carefully sculpted it and smoothed it out for the molding process. This is John Rosengrantz wearing the split head suit. His head's cocked back at an absolutely horrendous position to get this shot.
Action. Okay.
So here we took an actual police uniform, and we put it over a body, and then we impregnated it with resin so that it would hold the shape after we had kind of dressed in the wrinkles the way we wanted them. Then we split the arm. Christopher Swift sculpted in the detail to make it look like a big splash split. Here you can see Christopher Swift standing behind me, helping to secure the arm as we do our first initial tests of the arm splitting open. In the actual film, it flies open quickly, but we didn't want to damage any of the cables or any of the mechanism that operated it in our first test here. You can see the cables running down my leg. That leads to a controller, which allows the arm to split away from the body and then controls the hand, the arm. The left arm is not mechanical. As you can see, it's mine. I have to hold it very still. Every time they move that lever, it puts a lot of pressure, and you can see my body kind of shaking around a little bit as they're moving it. Chris Swift and Andy Schroenberg are working on the big splash body. Very similar effect to the one that happens with the head after it gets shot with a shotgun. Again, same process we used for the uniform parts. We used resin to capture the wrinkles and hold them solid, and then sculpted in the splash. Then this was shined up with crystal clear, and then a mold was made on that. Here we're taking it apart for mold making. Got a little dodgy there. Now here you can see it was a full puppet. You can see the puppeteers peeking up from behind. There's Shannon Shea and Evan Brainerd.
In that shot where we see the legs operating, Shannon and I are probably operating the handles that make the puppet go up and down, and there's probably two more guys below that are basically handling just adjustment. So like you could go left or right or forward and back with under the power of those two guys.
This is the first test of that mechanized split.
And what we did is used a cutout piece of nylon plastic, just a sheet of it, and we folded it in half, and that's the puppet closed. And it was under so much tension that we had to have a locking mechanism, and that was held together with a pneumatic cylinder. Neat thing about the nylon is we could, cut it to any shape. So once we saw what that pattern looked like open, it was a very organic splash.
I don't think many people, because it was the first CG film and CG gets a lot of credit, I don't think a lot of people realize how many puppets are in this film. I mean, there are at least a dozen different puppets of different things in this film.
Yeah, well, actually, I think I often talk about Terminator 2 as being, in my opinion, a great example of taking physical effects and enhancing them digitally, which I felt that a lot of those movies that were in the 90s were a lot better than the movies in the 2000s, where they decided they'd do everything digitally and movies largely became cartoons.
Agreed. Those movies have not aged well. Those movies that were made in the early mid 2000s, and fortunately, we're seeing a return to the hybrid approach where you use every technique and keep the audience guessing. We're seeing, The Mandalorian is a wonderful example of that. The new TV series on Disney Plus. Tons of practical makeups in that show. Puppets. They built full-size banthas for that. And that's actually Legacy Effects. Stan's former team did that work. And then ILM obviously did their beautiful digital work. And you marry the two, and that's where magic happens.
Yeah, that's I was going to mention that Legacy Effects kind of grew out of the Stan Winston studio after Stan's passing. And a lot of the people we've just seen in those, or some of them at least in those videos, are the guys doing The Mandalorian and other movies.
That's right. That's right. Yeah, we're very proud to see the work they're doing to continue Dad's brand of magic. They've been doing amazing things the last 12 years since Dad left us.
Yeah, I kind of lose track of the order that some of these movies were done in. But while we're talking about it, the next one I've got up here is Predator.
Yes.
How did that come about?
Predator was a situation where a different company had been brought on to create the Predator character, Boss Films, under the supervision of Richard Edlund. Steve Johnson was actually the lead under Richard on this job, and the creature that they created was really cool and interesting, this like insect-like thing, but it was completely impractical for the jungle location. The performer, it was Jean-Claude Van Damme actually in that suit, was on these stilts, and he was unable to perform dynamically in the jungle on those steep hills. And after
big hills and all kinds of stuff to trip over as well.
yeah,
right?
it's terrible, just terrible.
Yeah.
It was just not designed well for that. And they, after I think a few days of shooting with that thing, John McTiernan sent the dailies to the studio and said, "We got to stop, guys. This is not working." And Arnold Schwarzenegger actually recommended that they call Stan, because they had just done Terminator 1 together. And Stan came on with his crew, and they banged out that iconic suit in like 6 weeks, which is pretty unheard of. And the rest is history. I mean, the Predator is an iconic character that lives on to this day.
I know when that happens periodically. On Krull, I had 6 weeks to produce the Beast and an army of slayers and prosthetic, makeup, and that was my first big movie where I didn't really have a crew. I had to try and just pull people together. But often, some of the best stuff comes out of things that you do by the seat of your pants. And we'll talk later on about animatronics. But animatronics people completely overlook. Grew out of the makeup department. Didn't grow out of engineers and other things. It grew out of people who were looking at the end results rather than the mechanisms that were going to get them there. More an artistic look. Let's have a look at some of the stuff that's from Predator.
Hi, this is Bill Basso.
Hello, my name is Shane Mahan.
Hi, this is Bruce Spalding Fuller for the Stan Winston School of Character Arts, and we're going to watch a behind-the-scenes tour of Predator 2. This is the initial full-figure design drawing that was done by John Rosengrant, showing the whole critter. There he is being sculpted.
This was my first job at Stan Winston's studio back in 1989, and I remember being really excited getting the call to come in and work on Predator 2, and I believe we were also doing Edward Scissorhands at that time. But to work on a Predator film was a real thrill. Crash McCreary rendering out a Predator face design. This is Shane sculpting the hero Kevin Peter Hall Predator head for Predator 2.
And John is working on the stunt head. So we literally did everything twice on this film, smaller and larger.
So again, we're using wed clay, which is an earth water-based clay, just to expedite the speed of things. I think in retrospect I would have used Roma. This is Bruce Fuller.
There's Bruce Fuller sculpting the armored backpack, including the medical kit.
Here I am working on the backpack armor. Again, wed clay. We did everything in wed clay. Very kind of new experience for me, not doing something organic, but doing something more hard-edged. See those shingles more or less on the shoulder piece. That was in Crash's drawing. I was handed a very, very complete drawing from Crash. And Stan's dictum was that, I was to do a portrait of that drawing. So to actually make all those shingles in wed clay, that was very interesting. Here we are, the Predator's bodies being prepared for molding. This is a wed clay sculpture, so if you were to just leave it out in the open air, it would dry out and crack and fall off the form. And nobody wants that. So what they're doing is they're painting shellac all over the clay. They're sealing the clay. What happens next is they're going to go with fiberglass with gel coat and then back it up with fiberglass cloth and make a two-piece mold on this. But first the clay needs to be completely sealed so that the fiberglass doesn't stick in it, and the clay can sit out in the open air while the mold's happening.
And at this point, the mold has been, the sculpture's been laid up for a two-piece mold. This looks like a test fitting on Brian Simpson, who was one of our assistants on the first film, and then he was sort of shanghaied into becoming a stuntman. He's had a great career ever since as a stunt performer.
I forget how tall Brian was, but he's quite a bit smaller than Kevin.
They're doing a test fitting there with Stan.
You see, at this point, we were trying to run different color foam right in the same mold. So we would run two different batches of foam. We'd run a gray batch of foam and then a yellowy batch of foam, and we'd paint the gray in and then dump the yellowy batch right on top of it and close the whole mold up at the same time. And you end up with this sort of a sloppy but effective two-tone version. You can see the gray sort of bleeds into the yellow, but it gets the basic colors where you want it.
Yeah, and of course, you know, the thing that really was a great deviation from, you know, people in suits and other things, I think, was Jurassic Park. That must have been something pretty extraordinary to, you know, to see the beginnings of.
That was hands down the most thrilling show to watch come together. Nothing comes close to that one. Seeing a T-Rex being built and engineered at the studio from start to finish was a dream come true for everyone involved. I got to actually puppeteer on the film, so I got to be up close and personal with those dinosaurs quite a bit. But honestly, everyone always asks me, and I know Dad feels the same way, what character stands out as perhaps the most groundbreaking and memorable from the studio's history, and that would have to be the T-Rex from the original Jurassic Park. It could move swiftly and gracefully and take direction. It was a marvel, and standing in front of that, seeing it come to life was one of the great thrills of my life. And that movie was something that hasn't yet been beaten, I don't think, since.
Not in physical effects, you know, in that way.
No way.
And I think that also because they did a lot of publicity about the digital effects on that, people lose sight of just how much of it was actually physical effects. Let's take a look at some of that.
The Tyrannosaurus Rex rebuilt full size, 9,000 pounds of a completely full-size animatronic robotic machine.
This is Richard Landon, mechanical designer for Stan Winston Studios on the original Jurassic Park project. I was in charge of creating the armature that supported the full-size sculpting stand for the T-Rex.
I'm Mike Tersick, and I was one of the artists fortunate enough to work on this project.
This is Shane Mahan, and we'll be talking about the creation of the sculpture of the full-size T-Rex from the first Jurassic Park.
Over there, a little bit more this way. Good. Okay, go back the other way.
Here's Stan talking to Steven Spielberg into the camera.
It's all for you, Steven. We love dinosaurs.
You're watching a very quick progression. That small fifth scale sculpture that you saw was the basis of these parts and components that you see now. We took the fifth scale, which was sculpted, and then it was cut like so many loaves of bread, if you can imagine that. Each piece was then numbered, and then the parts are cut out so that they can fit over the structure, the metallic structure that's going to support these pieces. So it's basically like constructing a hull of a ship. You see 15, 16, so on and so on. And how that was done was the parts were numbered top to bottom, analyzed, and then put on an opaque projector. And the projector was then projected on the wall to the correct scale, and then the wood was cut accordingly. So it was all done by eye and mathematics and a lot of calculations.
God, it was just an incredible undertaking, really, when I think back on it, that we actually managed to pull this off. There was so much ingenuity. Everybody really pulled together and really made this work. There's the miniature that Rich did, and the armature, and then the full-size armature in the background. I believe those are the legs as well, that you see, the tall pieces. So we're just about to get ready here and place the bulkheads on.
We were actually using techniques that were developed hundreds and hundreds of years ago by sculptors of large bronzes and such. There's the 5th scale painted, and that was our guide and our gauge for the reconstruction, because what we had to do is reconstruct the sculpture from scratch.
And Stan would come in on a regular basis and say, okay, I want to be sure that I've got room for the nostrils, I've got room for the eyes. Are you sure the spacing is correct? And that would not only mathematically prove on paper that it was correct, but then I had to also have to satisfy him artistically. And we would adjust little things like how much the belly would hang or how much the tail would droop, and some things weren't exactly the same as the original plan structure, but we changed it so that the artist liked it, because it's the artist's eye that always decided what the final product was there at Stan's.
Now a process of chicken wire and fiberglass is laid over the chassis of the creature's body. This is to give the clay something to stick to without going right through the wire, because at some point the weight would just push through. Respirators, doors are open. Okay, now many weeks later in this process, the first layers of clay are just being sort of drafted into place. This takes many days, and this is Roma clay. This is not a sulfur-free clay. This is Roma clay. I think it's a number 2 or number 3 medium clay. And those are gauge sticks. Those sticks that you see in there are gauges of thickness for the calculation of skin and where bones may go. What we had to do was we would take the 5th scale little castings and using the measurements recreate everything. Mike Tersick was in charge of sculpting the head predominantly.
My focus was the head and neck area. I wanted to make sure that I could keep that as accurate as possible. By this time I knew the sculpture pretty intimately, because I'd done the 5th scale and the small scale, and here we are on the big one. So basically everybody, if they had a sculpting question, they ran to me and for answers.
It was somebody's job every morning to cut clay from the packages and put pallets of clay in the oven in the other side of the building early in the morning to heat it up so that the clay was warm. This whole process from start to finish took 16 weeks to complete, just for the sculpture, not talking about molding it and casting it. I believe it was just for the sculpture.
I would close my eyes at night and see scale patterns.
This neat little tool I made. Kind of cool. Nice. Got a little round basic tool design. You could do this. Before, see, the primitive method was with this, and you would have to do this and then turn it.
I actually, I remember I put my initials MT up on the top of the T-Rex head, and Stan saw it. He said, "What's this?" And quickly I said, "Stan, you're looking at it upside down. That's not an MT, that's a WI for Winston Incorporated."
The teeth here are just have been mocked up out of foam core to get the look, the absolute look of how it's going to feel. But you can see like all the subtlety of wrinkles, scales. You know, this character had to feel 100% real, or the film just did not work.
Each sculptor would bring their favorite technique and their little tricks of the trade. Some of them would take the clay and stir it up with alcohol or acetone and liquefy it, and then they could apply sort of a sluice that almost looked like aged skin drawn out over an area. Other guys had different tools and techniques that they would try and teach the other guys to use, and over the course of the 3 months of the sculpture, they ended up doing a really good job of doing a really unified look. Everyone had their own contribution, and yet the T-Rex looked like one creature, not a patchwork quilt of various styles. There's the full-size T-Rex really kind of coming together. You can see the legs are on. She still needs her small arms up there at the base of her neck, but She's standing up into the top of the building. They actually had to raise the roof, literally, so that when she began moving and they did the mechanical structure, that she'd have somewhere to go. The small forearms were sculpted on a separate stand down a little closer to the ground, and then Stan would request on a regular basis that the whole thing be assembled so that you could tell the proportions were all correct, that everything looked right in relation to one piece to the next. Spielberg came by on a regular basis too. He stayed very involved in how it looked. The legs were originally aluminum structures. On the exterior, you can see the aluminum sticking out of the side, and that ended up being not enough to support the weight, so we had to change to steel exoskeletons to sort of hold up all that weight.
Thank you very much for watching. The creation of the T-Rex was monumental in the history of Stan Winston Studio, and it was one of Stan's great and most prized creations of creatures that he had done.
I'm Richard Landon. Thank you for watching the behind the scenes on the creating the full-size Tyrannosaurus Rex sculpture. It was a huge personal point of pride for me that Stan trusted me to create something so large and so heavy, having had no background before. We all grew out of makeups and Terminators and little tiny things, and for Stan to embrace this group of people as having the ability to step up and grow up and build something this fantastic and gigantic was a huge point of personal pride.
I haven't seen this video in years, and again, looking back at this, I can only wonder, what were we thinking?
Yeah, what were you thinking? I think people often, as I said earlier, they overlook the fact that animatronics grew out of the makeup department. And for those people who don't really understand, you would have like a makeup department that had an offshoot of a makeup effects group or workshop. And then you would have a special effects department. The special effects department would be doing explosions, and they would be doing big engineering items. And we would be building creatures. Initially, they thought we were going to just be doing stuff on actors. That's how we got away with it, because animatronics as a term came about from, as far as movies go, comes about from Empire Strikes Back, because of the union problems that we were having as makeup artists, doing stuff that all the other departments felt they should be doing. I know in the States, they got around that by going outside the studio and setting up, workshop at their home or in a warehouse somewhere. But we were all working inside the studio, and so we were upsetting the sculptors because we were sculpting creatures, and we were upsetting the plasterers because we were molding creatures, and we were upsetting the props department because we were building puppets, and we were upsetting special effects department because we were building mechanisms. And so they thought that having a new department called animatronics would overcome that political issue. And so that's where it all came from. But actually we didn't know, but in the background they were trying to set it up for Henson to come and make Dark Crystal and bring all his puppeteer crew on as animatronics people. So that was really the background of that. We're going to move on to another super popular movie, which is Aliens. Again, going back to suits and puppets and other things, extreme popular. And one of the guys who was my junior on the Life Force was Stephen Norrington, who you have. He was 16 at the time, and I don't think I gave him anything that challenged his abilities. Really, because I didn't know him at that point. But, he did a great job with Stan on creating the chest burster, and I think we've got that here as well.
Seeing this mechanism in action for the first time in 28 years, I'm struck by how organic and natural its motion is. The way that I approached it was looking at other kinds of tail mechanisms I had seen and pivoted mechanisms that were supposed to look kind of organic. It seemed like an approach that was more like a real spine or more like a real tongue or something like that was probably a bit more fruitful. And it also seemed like it was probably a lot simpler to make. The way that I did this was I just poured a bunch of dental acrylic into the core mold of the chest burster, pulled the solid lump out, cut it up on a bandsaw. Using a Dremel, I made 4 little grooves at each point of the compass on each of the little sections that I made from the core. So I had a bunch of discs like a spine, and each one had a little groove at each point of the compass. And I set into that Teflon tubing, and then down the center as a sort of as a spinal column I used just a piece of cable housing. And I found that it moved very, very fluidly, but that wasn't enough. You needed to then mount on top of the fluid tongue-like mechanism. You needed to mount at the head pivoting more traditionally on a universal joint with the 4 cables. And the combination of the tongue-like motion of the spine plus the head moving opposite to that often gives you that serpentine motion that looks so naturalistic. And the whole thing is very simple, operated by 8 cables from a couple of joysticks. Easily mass producible. And then the arms, you know, I gotta say, I'm kind of amazed at how much emotion comes out of those little arms. They were so small on the sculpture, there was no real chance of making a tiny little mechanism. You'd have to get into watchmaking to be that size. So I just thought, you know what, I'll pull them with one tiny little cable just to give them some motion. But looking at it now, it doesn't just move, it has a real character and a real emotional component. The whole thing ended up being kind of notable because it's so simple. It comes from an artist's point of view first rather than a mechanical point of view. And the result is greater than the sum of its parts, which is always a good thing. But for something this big, or a tongue, or a alien antenna, these interesting cable-operated spine mechanisms, you know, are always very rewarding.
That movie, Aliens, I know was something that standard in England. So I guess you didn't. I don't know how much you saw of what was coming together there.
We moved out to London for that show. The whole family, we packed up and moved to London, and I got to spend quite a bit of time at Pinewood and saw the stuff come together, and actually got to puppeteer a bit as well. And I just want to mention that, you know, the T-Rex from Jurassic Park would not have happened at Stan Winston Studio if it wasn't for Stan and his team doing the Alien Queen. The Alien Queen, seeing that is what made Steven think, okay, maybe Stan can pull off a T-Rex. Although they couldn't be more different. The Queen, the Alien Queen, is an exoskeletal character. It didn't have to have a soft, fleshy exterior, so much easier to pull off. Not to mention she's 14 foot tall versus 20 feet tall. Very different, but thank goodness that Alien Queen happened, because that led to all of the dinosaurs from Jurassic Park. I want to point out something Steve just said that was also said in the last T-Rex video, which is that these are mainly, and you mentioned it as well, these are artists first who then add the mechanical skill set to that artistic sensibility. These are not mechanics first, having to then learn to be artists. So there's such a distinction there, because someone who's a mechanic first, they're not thinking about organic movement or performance. They're thinking about function, getting the job done. Does the tractor do the thing? You know, they're not thinking about fluidity of motion and performance.
Absolutely. That was actually something I was about. That's really why I included that stuff of that Stephen was talking about there, because if you look at that mechanism, a mechanic or an engineer is never going to build that. I believe this is actually why animatronics grew out of the makeup department. I mean, partly it was because we had foam latex, so we were able to, you know, that was largely a secret in the industry at that point in time. So the special effects department didn't have that. So we could get more fleshy things out of it. But if you look at some of the creatures that were built prior to Star Wars, for example, you know, they move in a very mechanical fashion. And and the makeup artists across the world, almost simultaneously at that period of time, we were all developing what became known as animatronics out of prosthetics. It started with prosthetics, and it kind of grew from there. You start by sculpting something on someone's face, then it covers the face. You got people in suits. Then you take the people out of the suits and you put a hand in, and it becomes a pup, and the whole thing evolves into these mechanical things. But we were making stuff out of, and I'm sure it was the same everywhere else, we were making stuff out of plastic mechanisms pulled by string or little bits of wire. We were using the foam material, the softness of that material, to dampen the mechanical movements, which is the one thing that engineers don't do. Engineers don't want any slop. They don't want any give. They want something to be very precise. You press this button and it pushes it pushes a rod, and that moves an eyelid. And I think that something that is lost a lot today when people talk about being animatronics engineers is that they think about the tronics and they don't think about the anima. And we all grew trying to make things look biological. A shoulder is not a bull race and a hinge. It's a sloppy ball in a sloppy socket held together with rubber bands. And it's never going to build that, right? But we as makeup artists, we didn't have that preset idea of what it was that you couldn't do. An engineer goes to school for 4 years to learn that you mustn't do that, right?
Right. So true. So true. And the truly great animatronics experts are ones that really keep reminding themselves, think of the performance, make it move like something real. That's so important.
And that really does bring us on to what the school is all about, because the school is dealing with all aspects that we've just been looking at. Of course, there's I'm pointing with my little cursor here. There's prosthetics. There's building stuff with foam. Don't overlook the fact that Yoda, who was the world's first animatronic superstar, his body was made out of just fabricated out of sheep foam. And I think it's interesting to see that for beginners, there are things that they can work with that are in your courses that don't require them to be a first-class sculptor, or don't require them, to know everything before they start. There are things there they can buy in the supermarket or in the hardware store to get started, and courses at different levels that help them move through that, and also at different stages. I see how you break up your courses into part 1, part 2, part 3, so that they can focus on how to get from A to B before moving on to C and D. There's courses on mechanics and on painting and on silicon and on just about everything you could imagine, all for a fraction of the price that you would expect, and you can do the whole thing at home. I sound like I'm one of your salesmen. I have to say, I'm
You're
not
hired.
We're not taking any commission here, but I'm just very impressed. And you can't get a better pedigree than the ones that we've just been looking at. All of that stuff is there. There's talk to me about what's happening here, because I've tried to categorize some of this stuff. This is really about dressing items, isn't it?
Well, this was a This was a course on fabric. Actually, I love that you brought up fabrication techniques, because we one of our huge goals with this school, and it's the reason we went online with it, is accessibility, making it not only easy for people to access what we teach, but also easy for them to find a starting place that works for their skill level or for their access to materials. And a lot of the materials used in makeup effects, animatronics, are quite expensive. Fabrication techniques, no mold making required, no expensive silicones, very inexpensive epoxy clays in this case, and crepe hair for the beards, and very simple stuff with a great impact, gets a great impact. So that's what this course was all about.
Yeah, and one of the things that I liked when I was looking at this, I mean, this looks kind of complicated because you're dealing with stuff about electronics and animatronics through servos and other things. But it also, points out the fact that you can't animate eyes if you don't have eyes to animate. And a lot of the when you're buying professionally made eyes, trying to get them to make stuff that is made to, a top standard, but to the right size that you want, painted to your design, is a pretty damned expensive thing to do. And so one of the items that we've got here is talking specifically about making eyes.
Hey, I'm John Cherevka with the Stan Winston School of Character Arts. Welcome to my course on how to make eyes. Eyes are so important because they bring an element of reality to the character. First, I'm going to teach you how to make hemisphere eyes with reverse painting. We're going to cover the reverse painting process, creating depth, and layering colors backwards. What's cool about these is you can purchase them for pennies and make something amazing with no failure of the technical process. And then the next style is a full sphere. This may be more applicable in a puppet. It starts off this way, but I'm going to show a trick making a pupil that you can see down into. I'll start with basing the eye black, painting the eye, unmasking the pupil, and sealing the eye. The benefits of this process, it's fast-paced, you can make a high-quality eye and still have a nice deep pupil. The next style I'm going to teach you is making a vacuform eye for masks. Step 1, I'll teach you how to vacuform. I'm going to show you how to do reverse painting, creating depth, and layering colors backwards, and then the final sealing. As you can tell, we have a lot to cover today, so let's get started.
Yeah, and I'm going to go through a whole bunch of these different things here for those people that are out there. Some of them are going to be pretty simple starting points, and some of them will get a little more complex. And I think that's one of the things that is great about your school, is that people can move at their own pace, and they can do it in the time that's most suitable for them, but they can grow their skills, and they can go back at any time to double check. If you go to school, a live school, you can't go back and take that class again, a year later.
You have to be a great note taker, or you're going to miss it all. And that is, again, one of the benefits of the approach we've taken, is you can rewatch a course as many times as you want. You can pause, you can rewind, you can review, and you're learning from. These are working professionals. Every single one of our teachers is a working professional who is bringing the most up-to-date techniques and techniques that are going to fit within current production standards. So that's another benefit of learning.
Yeah, actually, I have a comment on that as well. When I was young, I used to teach at drama school before I ever got into movies. Once I was getting enough work, I stopped doing that. And I say to people, you realize that when you go to college, you're spending a huge amount of money to be taught by trailing edge people. The cutting edge people are too busy to teach at college. They're actually busy doing the job, right?
Exactly.
And so, you have the advantage that these are cutting edge people that are doing, professional movies, that step in because they can spare, a day to put together a class, whereas they can't spend years teaching in college. They want to be on the cutting edge.
That's exactly right. None of our teachers. It's no worries. None of our teachers would be able to go teach at a brick and mortar school. They're too busy, as you said, working on films, but they can teach a course for Stan Winston School. So we have a faculty that you will not find at any brick and mortar school.
Exactly. And I talked earlier about fabricating from foam. I'm going to run the video that relates to that too.
Great.
Hello, I'm Ted Haynes for the Stan Winston School of Character Arts. We are at part 3 for how to make a T-Rex, foam fabrication. We're going to learn a lot of stuff in this one. We're painting the T-Rex. We are making an eyeball. We are mechanizing an eyeball, meaning we've got a left-right movement, we've got an eyelid blink. We're painting the teeth, we're constructing and painting the tongue. We're doing a lot of stuff. It's all the finish work, it's all the detail work. We're kind of bringing it to life now. You've seen part 1 and part 2 is the raw form. Months of work went into this guy. We're finally finished. This has been a great journey. I've had so much fun working on this thing. I've never been allowed to build something this big and this crazy. And the Stan Winston School has given me the opportunity to just go nuts with this. So I went nuts. And, sometimes everybody kind of went, geez, Ted, you're nuts. But this has been a great deal of fun. So I hope you enjoyed part 1, part 2, and now part 3 finally. You've all been asking for it. So let's get started.
And, you know, because we're not just talking about building T-Rexes, although I'm sure that T-Rex was a lot cheaper and a lot lighter than the one your dad built. We're talking about, you know, people in suits and you know, and various things that that relate to that, that, you know, work just as well. We've run your video about the T-Rex. You know, again, we're going to talk about puppets here because you know, people don't think of Yoda as a puppet. People still say to me, "Oh, wasn't he a guy in a suit?" You know. But what I like about you, of course, is also that when you are talking about puppets, you cover stuff that varies from Muppet-style puppets and goes on to really onto rod puppets, which is a very professional way of moving things that's used a lot in movies. I'm gonna run the video for that too.
Hi, I'm BJ Geyer here for the Stan Winston School of Character Arts. Welcome to part 1 of my web course on how to build a hand and rod puppet. Today we're going to be focusing on understructure, and that's everything you need to bring your character to life. Now, without these components, you're just going to end up with another prop to stick on a shelf. So we want to make sure that you start with a living, breathing character. We're going to be covering a ton of material and techniques involved in the creation of a puppet, including all of the elements we need to create a functional mouth plate to make your puppet work properly, hand and rod armatures for your hands to give your fingers the ability to bend and move. We're going to go ahead and build arms as well. So if you've never touched a puppet and just wanted to try, or maybe you've put a sock on your hand and drew a face on it, this is the perfect course to start out. I hope you can join me.
See you there! We'll be here. We'll be waiting.
Great thing about that, of course, is that it's something that anybody can do. Gives them confidence to really get started on something you know, of that nature. And it's you know, it's something where you can physically see, you can buy the stuff locally and move on from there.
Hi, I'm David Monzingo for the Stan Winston School of Character Arts, and I'm going to be teaching a lesson on constructing a rod puppet. Why don't we start off by talking about what exactly is a rod-controlled puppet? Well, basically, of all the different kinds of puppets to build, how do you move it around? There's hand puppets, there's animatronics, and there's rod puppets. Rod puppets are basically a character that has points coming out that are controlled externally. Unlike an animatronic that has servos or hydraulics or something inside that's motivating the articulation, rod puppets are performed externally by a puppeteer to move things around. The cost of digitally removing a rod or a series of rods is far less than creating a whole digital character or, say, creating an animatronic character that doesn't have rods. That's why these have become so popular, because you can get all the articulation that you want to see, all the nuances of one of these puppets without having to have the expense of going all digital or having to create an animatronic that's very time consuming and very expensive as well. Almost every single puppet we do for any feature film or commercial has at least some portion of it controlled by a rod. Even if it's an animatronic character, there's some facet that will be puppeteered by a rod-controlled mechanism.
So yeah, you know, the whole thing with building puppets, small items, things that people can get started with, that they then can give them hours of pleasure just playing with it too, right? I mean, I think it's also surprising how many makeup artists who moved to animatronics ended up as operators and puppeteers as well, because they were the people who understood the stuff at its best. You know, I think I was the first person in England as a makeup artist to be directing second unit on animatronic sequences, and but that was happening all over the world at that same time. It was just a natural evolution. That's something that you saw, with your growing up, saw it all all evolving.
Yes. It's interesting that you bring up that the performance aspect of it. That really has become one of the biggest payoffs of becoming a makeup effects artist or an animatronics artist, is being able to take it to set and finally bring it to life. And actually these artists and mechanics protect that very intensely. They don't want to hand their creation off to someone who's not intimately familiar with how it works. And if it breaks, you need someone there who knows how to fix it, and you know someone who knows how to work it. And that was, again, Stan never liked being called an effects artist. He didn't like that. He liked to be called a character creator. He liked to be known as someone who would bring the star of your film to life. And that is really the end goal for any of these artists or mechanics, is that final performance. Everything's leading to that point of bringing it to life in the film. And that is why them taking it to set and bring it to life is so important.
Yeah, and that's something that was a hard call in England because of the unionization of everything. We struggled with that. It was very hard to break out from being a guy who put powder on someone's nose. And actually, the makeup artists would be looked down on by the cinematographers and the engineers and the others. It's like, yeah, well, they're just doing little unimportant stuff. We could probably film it all without makeup anyway. Just light it differently. To break out of that had political implications as well as everything else. And it wasn't. It was a good 5 years after Empire before we really got to a point where we could start to operate our own stuff. And one of the arguments I had with cinematographers when I had a big blow up on Highlander, where the cinematographer just would not accept the fact that that I was going to direct second unit, and I had a makeup ticket, and he just kept on stirring the pot and saying, yeah, but, yes, but. But, the idea of having someone there who didn't know how something worked and didn't know what it could do and what it couldn't do, then just coming out the top of their head and saying, well, let's do X, Y, and Z, just didn't work. In fact, towards the end, I was doing all the storyboards for the animatronic sequences, or rather, I had a faster artist who was doing from my department doing the storyboards. And I would say to the director, look, what you see in that storyboard is what you're going to get. I might not even paint if it's going left to right and you just see one side of the face, I may not even paint the other side of the face if we haven't got time for it, right? I'm just going to give you what you see in that shot. That's going to be what it is. But the politics that were related to that were difficult. Let's get back to the school, because that's what we're here to talk about, right? What am I looking at? What am I looking at here?
This is a recent course on molding and casting high-end silicone masks. These gentlemen are part of a company called Immortal Masks here in Southern California, and they are recognized as the leaders in high-end silicone mask making. They've really perfected the form. They've got a core they've created that's very unique, that allows the mask to really sit on a face very nice and snug. And they were gracious enough to share their process with us. I had been approached them for a while, and they finally said, okay, we'll share. And yeah, it was a great course. This came out last year.
Cool. And this looks like it's something to do with mold making too.
That's right. This is Gary Yee. He was a Stan Winston Studio veteran, currently at Legacy Effects. This was a stone mold making course. And in this image, he's finding the case line or the parting line on this sculpture. It will be a two-part mold, and he's just sort of sketching very gently
where the highest point is. He's just determining the highest point, where he wants the front of the mold to join the back of the mold. Exactly. People look at everything being fiberglass, the molding these days, but actually there is still several areas where stone molds have a significant advantage. Here, of course, we're
Absolutely.
looking at sculpting or mask making.
This is also a mask making course, but this is for a slip latex mask. So this will be a stone mold. When you're making a slip latex mask, you cannot use a non-porous molding material. You need to use stone because when you pour the latex into that stone mold, that plaster draws out the moisture and allows you to create a nice skin of latex. That wouldn't work with an epoxy or fiberglass mold. So stone molds are still very useful for certain applications.
Exactly. I'm rattling through a few of these here because I partly want to show how, there's multiple different people that are covering similar aspects, but from different points of view. And that's kind of nice. If you go to a school and they're going to teach you a particular subject, you have one teacher for that subject. But, your online school, you get the perspective of multiple different teachers.
I'm so glad you brought that up. This here is a sculpture course with Casey Love. This is using polymer clay, super sculpey. But the point you make is great. There have been artists I've approached to teach a sculpting course, and they've said, but Matt, you've got like 30 sculpting courses. I don't know what I would add. I would say, and I always say to them, I say, every artist brings a different point of view. Now, there might be a lot of things you do that are similar, but I guarantee you, there is a technique or an approach that you have developed that is unique to you. So we can have multiple sculpture courses and you'll always pick up something new because every artist has a slightly different approach. It's another sculpture course. This is wet clay, water clay, different material.
Yeah, water clay is not considered, mainstream anymore. But I have to say that I still, I guess I'm a dinosaur myself. I still, much prefer working with a water clay. And sometimes, I'll sculpt something in water clay and it'll hang around for a month or so before I actually get around to molding it. It isn't actually that hard to keep it moist if you just keep an eye on it once a day. I mean, it's much more versatile in being able to work with it super soft or allow it to dry out and carve it more. You don't need to heat it to texture it, for example. I find it personally, I much prefer it.
There are a couple schools. Some people love the oil-based clays, but many love wet clay. This is also a wet clay sculpture because number one, it's a fraction of the cost of oil clays. You can get a ton of it for very little. But also, as you said, as it slowly starts to dry out, the texture changes. It becomes easier to detail. Once you figure out wet clay, there are many who just prefer it over oil, including yourself.
Yeah, there's a lot of stuff that you can do, but I think that what you raised about the cost is particularly relevant to beginners. Those people who, like me, started, downstairs in the garage, messing around with stuff on a bench before they ever got to a professional level. It's something that is a first stage, and it's reusable too. So once you've made your molds, I know in the studios when people are using wet clay now, they just throw it away. They say, oh well, it's cheap. But I was brought up at a time when materials were expensive, and so we saved everything. And so we would clean up the clay, and okay, we might not use it for sculpting, but that all got used for mold making or whatever else.
Right.
Stuff goes on for better uses. And we've got another video here that I'm going to run about this particular course.
Hi, I'm Norman Cabrera with the Stan Winston School of Character Arts. Welcome to Sculpting Monster Mask Part 1. Sculpting a latex mask is really a great way to learn how to make monsters. I always try to tell people, make a simple mask first. Anything that you can do in a more advanced makeup, you can basically do in a mask. In this first class, we're going to cover inspiration and reference. I always like to start off with inspirational materials to look at to get me excited about the piece I'm going to work on. I'll also show you anatomy reference, which I feel is really, really important. When sculpting anything, always refer back to anatomy and reference. Then I'm going to prepare the tools and materials to show you what you need to make your mask. Then we're going to go straight into blocking out primary forms. That's the most important thing. How does this thing read? How does it play from a distance? Before we get into details, before we get into any secondary forms, we want to make sure we work all those steps out. We have a lot to cover, so let's jump right in.
I'd like to show, more of the wide variety of stuff that you do, because I think that's critical too to what you're doing here. You've got courses that relate to drawing. I assume this is all about lighting and electronics. We've got courses here about making miniatures, or I'm not sure if this is it stop motion?
Stop motion animation with the Kyoto brothers, yes.
Right, so there you go. And in fact, I did a panel with these guys at one of the conventions one time. And here, we're looking at fine artists showing techniques that they use to create miniatures that have a lot of life in them. I like this video that I'm going to run, because it really accentuates. It's much more than just grabbing a bit of clay and making something that looks like a monster. It's got anatomy, and it's got movement and other things that are in there. Top quality stuff.
Hi, I'm Simon Lee for the Stan Winston School of Character Arts. Welcome to my lesson.
So you've got courses that relate to painting, whether it be painting foam or resin or silicon or whatever. I mean, there's just there's just lots of stuff there. Another video relating to that. Yeah, looks like Matt's having problems with his internet connection coming and going. So let me just, move along with this. Silicon's one of those very tricky things to try to get a paint to adhere to, and to try and make it look interesting. So courses that relate to dealing with silicon, which is probably the most modern material that people tend to be using, is really relevant.
Hi, I'm Jamie Grove from Stan Winston School of Character Arts. Welcome to Platinum Silicone Mask Painting Part 1. A lot of the shops nowadays are moving their systems over to platinum silicone, so this course will cover everything you need to know on how to paint a platinum silicone mask. We're going to start out today by showing you how to prep your surface so all your paint will stick. And then I'm going to show you how I mix my platinum silicone slurry. And once the paint is mixed, I'm going to show you a variety of techniques on how to paint this mask, including airbrushing, modeling, spattering, and veining. I'm really excited about showing you these techniques, so let's get started.
Yeah, so I'm really just trying to show you here the variety of stuff. People, we're talking about finishing there, but of course they do stuff on animatronics as well, and mechanizing various things. These courses are things that will take you step by step by step through the learning process, and I think. I really wish I'd had this to train my own people when I was making movies. Let's take a look at the next video.
Before you begin building any real full-size finished mechanical element, you need to start with a sort of testing jig. That would be a low-resolution fixture that approximates the general capabilities and the proportions of the character. You can literally just throw together garbage bags and foam core, rods, and even coat hangers just to form a study model to basically flesh out your ideas and get a first pass on the established size and shape of something as a point of approval for the artists and the creative people involved. When we were doing our research for the Alien Queen in the movie Aliens, we actually took garbage bags, black tape, black spray paint, and a whole bunch of big pieces of cardboard and foam core, and actually built the Alien Queen in one afternoon. And that was simply to give us an idea of size, scope, and scale of the project, so that we would have some idea of what it was we were going to actually build and test it in relation to an actual human standing next to it. I do the same thing on almost every project that I'm working on. I've got here two test legs that are duck legs. One of them is just a walking cycle so that it just does the same thing over and over and over again. And the other one is a more puppeteerable thing, so you can actually choose when it's hopping how fast to go up and down, or whether you want to stop and pause for a second. And they're just two different ways to create a point of departure so that you can talk to the creative people you're working with on what is the best path to actually get to your achievable goal. The translation of rotary motion through a pulley is probably the most basic mechanical functionality that you could understand in order to put into a character. We use this in almost any character in any situation that you're going to build. It's an eyelid, it's a tongue, it is the translation that you need to understand in order to actually build a mechanical creature. Rotary and linear motion are the two most basic tenets of any creature effect that you are ever going to build. So you need to take a sphere, which is exactly the same size and shape as your mechanism, that is actually pressed into the back of the clay and give you a void, the actual space that is held out in the back of the skin to seat the mechanism. Somewhere to glue it down for the final motion. And because you're the person that built the character, that built the mechanism inside the creature, you're the person that has the best working knowledge of the strengths and limitations of what that character and creature can do. So if there's someone that's going to give that ultimate perfect performance, it can be you.
So yeah, welcome back, Matt. We're pleased to see you. You got back again. It's we're getting close to the end here. Next section, of course, is that we haven't covered, which is where largely character arts, in the terms that you're applying it, started, which is prosthetics. Whether it be, a lot of people will start with zombies and blood effects because that's the easiest thing to do, and it's something they can scare their neighbors with. But prosthetics in terms of changing noses and doing other stuff. Making noses was where I started with prosthetics. I think the first thing I ever sculpted was a nose.
I just wanted to share very quickly, Stan would often, people would come to the studio to see if they could get a job there. He'd show a portfolio full of fantastic characters. And my dad would say, okay, I need you to go away now. You need to go sculpt a nose. You need to mold a nose. You need to apply a nose and paint the nose. If you can do that flawlessly, you can do anything. So he felt that was the true test. If you could apply something right in someone's face.
You're trying to fool people. He talked about creating life. You're trying to fool people into believing that something is real. And everybody knows what a nose looks like, right?
Yes, and it's right in the middle.
Yeah, and I would often say too, when they say, "Oh, I can do this creature and I can do that creature," I say, "Yeah, show me what you do for an old age makeup, right? Because the old age makeup is so much harder than any fantasy creature because everybody's looking at old age people all the time. You're looking and go, oh, that's fake." Right? Whereas a creature, you can just push it around and you say, "Oh yeah, that's good. I kind of like that. That'll do." right? It's a different thing. Let's look at the video about prosthetics.
Hi, I'm Brad Look with the Stan Winston School of Character Arts. Welcome to this third section of creating alien makeups. I'm going to show you how to take generic appliances and turn them into fantastic alien makeups. Very useful because many times you're not going to have the advantage of having custom-made appliances for your actor. Before we get started with the makeup, I'm going to show you how to prep the actor, prep the appliance, and how to get everything ready. We will move on to then the application of the facial appliance in this makeup. We also have ear appliances, and I also explain how to make a blender to extend the hairline further back once the wig is placed. The next part is the coloring of the appliances. This is where you're going to use everything from Pax makeup to tattoo ink, rubber mask grease paint, and some of the newer silicone makeups such as Jourdain and others. Once the makeup's painted, you're going to move on to the tattoo application, and then also how to use creatively different types of stencils that are available now to makeup artists. Last is the application of the wig, hair pieces, and final detailing to the makeup. Hair pieces can be a very, very expensive part of creating a character like this. So I'm going to show you how to take everything off and clean it and prep it for the next time you need to put it on. This will be followed by the removal, how to take all this makeup off without injuring the actor. As you can see, there's a lot to cover, so let's get started.
Stuff. I know you've got courses about knotting wigs or beards or whatever else as well. I remember very early on when I was trying to practice dressing beards, and I couldn't afford, to go buy a beard. So I learned how to knot my own beard just so that I could practice dressing it. There are things that you can do that are not going to cost huge amounts of money, and I know that you cover a lot of that in the different courses. What have I not mentioned so far?
You've covered so much, Nick. I have to say, I appreciate how well versed you are on what we offer. I appreciate that you have done your homework and that you are fully aware of the range of courses we offer. I just want to reiterate something you've said several times, which is that although our teachers are working professionals, we've made a huge effort to teach not only to experts, but also to brand new folks who don't have a foundation in this area. That was very important to us, that we do give entree to people who are curious, and we don't make it too intimidating. So we've really made a goal to do that.
Actually, I think there's a couple of elements in that. A lot of people, some of the stuff that I do is motivational talks to try and encourage people just to have the courage to step outside the box and go for what it is they really want to do. And I think that there's a lot of people who have commitments of one sort or another, or even just parents that are saying to them, oh, you've got to have a proper job, that really want to follow their dream, but are stuck in a trail that takes them in a different direction, at least for a period of time. And one of the things that is good with you, if it's someone who is wanting to do cosplay, they probably have a regular job. Even if they're a professional cosplayer, they're making their money online. Talking to your course allows them to look at stuff at their own speed. The people who are just starting out, who would love to do this stuff, even if they just want to do it for Halloween, they can do it at their own pace and at a price. I keep coming back to this price, and forgive me for this, but at a price that a parent or a family member might be prepared to give as a Christmas present. At $300 is not like an arm and a leg or buying a car. It's something that then they can look up the specific thing they're trying to do today, but then when they have a few moments, they can look at those other things that maybe they want to do tomorrow. And one of the other things that I say in my little book of big ideas is I say, don't waste your time. You can spend a lot of time watching stuff on YouTube that is perhaps people who know no more than you do, just trying to be a personality on YouTube. These are professional people who are actually have already proven their value, and they're also they're able to help you make the most of your time. when you're young, there seems to be a lot of time. As you get older, you suddenly realize you're running out of time, and time's a pretty precious thing. And so, and so all of those things, this course allows you to utilize your time in a realistic way. You do the stuff you have to do, and then in the evening or in the weekend, you're doing the studying at your own pace to do what you want to move on to.
That's right. We're not giving you the assignment. You can create your own assignment using the techniques we teach you. I want to get to something that you said, and it's so important that people understand this about what we're doing and about what Stan was all about. Stan, growing up, would always say to my sister and I on a regular basis, "So, what did you create today?" He was all about creation. It didn't matter what you were creating, whether it was a book report or a fort in the backyard or it didn't matter. And then he would always say this, do what you love and success will come. And he really was a motivational speaker kind of person.
Yeah.
He inspired people to think big, to go after their dreams. And that's what we're doing here. It just so happens our way of doing it is makeup effects, but our message is much bigger than makeup effects. It's really about pursuing your creative passion, no matter what that is. That's what gets us out of bed every morning, and clearly that's where you're coming from, Nick.
Yeah, it is. The little book that I wrote is really a motivation on exactly those lines for anybody who wants to be anything. They don't have to be in movies. They don't have to be an artist. They don't have to be a sculptor. They could want to go work for NASA. It really wouldn't make a difference. The point is, it's about focusing on taking a little step every day towards what is your passion. If you invest and build a career around your passion, then it's not work. You don't sit and look at your watch and go, oh, it's 4 o'clock. I've only got an hour to go and then I can go home. You look at your watch and say, oh, it's 11 o'clock. Shit, I've worked all evening. Maybe I'd better go home now and get something to eat.
Yes.
Because your passion carries you through. And if you have passion for something, you excel at it, because the guy sitting next to you, he hasn't got the same passion. So you're the one who's excelling. You'll always succeed at something you have a passion for. It just might take a few years to get there.
Oh, yes. But the journey is worth it. The journey is worth it.
Yeah, I got another video here. I'm going to get back to these because we've been running for a little over an hour and a half, and I want to make sure that we're done within the next, before we hit 2 hours, let's put it that way. Okay. So I got a couple of videos to finish up with, and the first one relates to seaming silicone. You know, silicone, by its very nature, is a kind of material that it's kind of slippery and rubbery and not terribly easy to connect other things to. I mean, seaming is something that you have to deal with in any creature that you build that isn't just a one-piece mold. And so seaming, although that might not sound like something that's terribly exciting when you start out, is a critical element to producing something of a high and believable standard.
Hi, my name is Chris Grosnickel, and I'm here with the Stan Winston School of Character Arts. This is the art of sculpting and patching with silicone. Sometimes you gotta get into the weeds. You gotta show the dirty things that make things great. We're a team, we're a village, and if one of us doesn't pull our weight, then the thing doesn't work. It just doesn't look right. We're going to be talking about the different types of silicone today and the tools of the trade, which I have laid out right here. After that, I'll be going over the cleaning process when I'm done doing the nip job. Then you'll be learning how to match softness and plasticity of the silicone. From there, I'll be showing you different skin textures and the do's and the don'ts on how to attack a seam. Finally, we'll be going over the sealing of your patch and how to lock it in for paint. I'm very excited to show you my techniques. We have a lot to cover, so let's jump in.
I know that today in a lot of movies, stuff gets broken down a lot. Your dad and myself and Stuart, and we were all-rounders. We expected to do everything from sculpting to molding to whatever else. Today, there seem to be people who focus just on animatronics and people who focus just on seaming even. And I have to admit, on Life Force, where I had a crew of 70 people, which was my biggest crew, I did have to break it down that way. But I encourage the people that are watching to learn each aspect of the job, because I often say, when I wanted to achieve something that I didn't know enough to be able to do. I would bring in an expert in that field, but then I would spend my time, I wouldn't just leave it to him, I would spend my time watching him, so I had at least a grounding in that. I'm not sure I was ever brilliant at anything, but I had a good grounding in everything, and that allowed me to be able to make stuff that was more innovative than being limited. You know, I say, don't put yourself in a box. Don't put yourself in a creature effects little job box either, right? Expand, always expand your knowledge base.
Agreed. And specializing is something you do see more at the larger shops. The smaller shops are more like the old days, where you are expected to do a bit of everything. But the point you make about even if you might not be the most brilliant finisher, know a bit about what finishers do, so that you can speak intelligently about them, and so that you can understand where you fit in the overall process.
And you grow that way too, because you do the basics. You can do the basics of the finishing and then let the expert just put the final touches on it and learn from what he's doing, so that next time your basics are that much better. You know, just keep expanding and growing. I got one last thing that I was going to put up here. You know, a lot of people might look at this and I've just done the wrong thing, but there it is. You know, it's a kind of fun look at people in suits. I think often people will look at stuff like this and think of the old Godzilla movies, the stuff long before you know, any of the people we've been talking about were getting involved. And this does look kind of hokey in that regard, right? But the basis of it, you know, goes on into a lot of other things. And you have this really good video that I've kind of saved for the end. That shows you know, creature effects that I think most people watching the movie would have thought was digital or at least animatronic, that actually was a guy in a suit.
So what we're looking at here is a 1/5 scale model to test the proof of concept of putting a man inside of a raptor suit. And the man that you're seeing right now is a model of me, John Rosengrant. I was inside the raptor costume along with Mark Crash McCreary. He was in another raptor. And what you're looking at right now is what the girls are doing is they're cutting up out of foam and L200 a mock-up or a really elaborate garbage bag test of Raptor. And I call it a garbage bag test because that dates back to when we did Aliens for Jim Cameron. We actually constructed a queen alien full size out of garbage bags and foam core similar to this, but to prove that proof of concept. And what we're doing right here is the same thing, it's just a little bit more elaborate version. And if you frame out this figure from about the knees down, you can kind of see how it was going to be used. And in the film, there's several scenes where it's used. There's two of them walking in the kitchen, and we did exactly what we're talking about, framing it out from the knees down. Here's some tests of it running. So it's very organic and it was very mobile. So it was trying to figure out all the ways to make this stuff work. Right now you're looking at a kind of an elaborate test of a neck mechanism that Stan had come up with. It was very clever. You can see Stan's kind of working on, with me, part of this chicken head bird-like movement. And inside of it I actually had rods that controlled the basic head move and tilt and turn. And so all of this was being refined during this process. And the idea was that the eyes and the jaw and the arms on it would end up being radio controlled. But here's the beginnings of getting that sort of bird-like head movement. Crash and Stan are joking around with, but what we were doing is trying to work out the range of movement. And Stan's doing other things. Always the joker. But at this point, what you're seeing is Crash and I would train together and get ready for this. But at this point, there's rough skins on this.
We're really starting to refine, how it's going to work, get control of the head. And at this point, I think I may have control over the jaw. I'm not, to be honest, I can't remember if that ended up being separate or not, or if we ended up controlling. No, I actually do remember now. We have control over the jaw, and the head moves. You can see it's come a long way since the very first test. Here, it's very mobile. Now, these are the legs for the scene which was attached to the whole suit, where I step in the doorway and it stands up and it starts hooting for the other raptor to come in the kitchen. Here it is with the paint is getting, closer and more finalized, starting to really start to look like something at this point. And later we ended up getting the RC arms working to get a bit of motion there. We got a bit of blink. Well, I hope you guys enjoyed this exclusive peek behind the scenes into the making of the Raptor suit for Jurassic Park. It's fun for me to look at this after all these years. It was quite a personal challenge, physically very demanding to be in these suits, but very rewarding to be part of this groundbreaking historic film.
Yeah, I had actually written to John to try to get him to come and do some of the do one of our StarNet items. I know he's been overseeing The Mandalorian, and obviously carved out a niche now that has grown from his work with Stan. I didn't get an answer, so I guess it never got to him. But we'll see. Maybe we'll manage to pull him up another time. That's pretty much all the videos that I wanted to run, and I'm hoping that everybody out there has enjoyed watching them, and I'm hoping that that you'll be interested in knowing how you're going to subscribe for the Stan Winston School of Character Arts, and I'm sure Matt's going to tell you.
Yes, all you have to do is go to stanwinstonSchool.com. No application process necessary. All you need is a curious mind and a desire to learn something new. And we offer a free 7-day trial. So you can dive in and check it out for free for a week and see if you like it. I think you will. There's something there for pretty much everyone.
Yeah, and I know that you do new courses each month. Is that right? Something like that?
Yes, we put out a new course every month, covering a new facet of this wonderful craft.
Right, or a new artist covering a facet that you've already covered. And I would stress that too. We touched on it earlier, but when you start talking about prosthetics, for example, the way that 3 people apply prosthetics and the tricks that they have in getting the edges down or whatever it is, whether it's mechanics, animatronics, you're going to get different people that are going to approach it in different ways. Don't just watch one video, watch multiple videos, because you're going to learn something additional from each and every one of them. And you have stages of subscription, don't you?
Yes, we do. We have the yearly, which you mentioned, which is about $350 for unlimited access. That's for a full year. We also have, for those who just want to dip their toe in, we have a $19.99 basic plan. That's a monthly plan, and that allows you to hop in and hop out as you have time. Very reasonable. And then we have a premium plan, which is also a monthly plan, which is I think $50. It's our most expensive option. So I would say either go annual and you get unlimited, or go the basic for $19.99.
Right. Yeah. But I think that, okay, you could start at the $19.99, but I suspect that if you're building something, you're going to home in on what it was that you needed to know today. And then tomorrow you're going to find yourself spending another $19.99 to look at something else. I don't think you can do really better than an annual subscription.
I agree. That's our best value. I agree, Nick.
Yeah. Well, Matt, it's been great having you here, and I really thank you for taking the time and the trouble to come and join us and tell us all about your online courses. And I hope that maybe we'll get to, interact with the school some other way, somewhere along the way.
Well, thank you so much, Nick, for the invitation. I so appreciate what you're doing to inspire people to pursue their passions, and really appreciate the spotlight you've shown on what we're doing at Stan Winston School and the history of Stan Winston Studio.
Cool. Well, thank you. And I guess with that, I'm going to say to everyone that's out there, thank you for watching. If you enjoyed the show, what we did today, please consider being a patron and subscribing to our to our Patreon support. We get people that donate $5 a week or whatever, and that helps us keep the foundation going. $5 a month, sorry, or whatever they like. And it's a bit like joining a club, because we tell you about something, and we put on a video every single week on a Sunday about some other aspect of creativity. So thank you for watching, and from all of us here, may the force be with you always.